Well, hello. I'm just so glad to hear that we're talking about this kind of work from the point of connection, because for those of you who do know me, I'm highly extroverted, and everything I do is in connection to other people. When people ask me, how did you know about the ministry? I said, I didn't know, people had to tell me. So, I really do function in community and thrive in community for the most part. And that's really how we work at A Just Harvest. We've been around for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary this year. And we were founded in a partnership model. We've always done things collaboratively. And so it wasn't unusual for us to begin to do community organizing, because that requires that you be in relationship and build relationship in order to exercise a power for change. And so I didn't really give a whole lot of theological positions. I did give some biblical examples of where we come from when we organize. And I want to say we do advocate. We advocate with, not for, the communities that we are in relationship with. When I think about organizing, I think about accompanying. How do we accompany one another on this journey towards building a just and beloved community? How do we begin to be kingdom builders together? And that requires that we be in relationship. And so we actually use the word organizing intentionally, because it's a little different than advocating. While it's not contrary, and sometimes it includes that, organizing really does go a step further in saying we're not just going to call or sign a letter. We're going to walk with, we're going to fight with, we're going to, if we have to, die with, and we're not requiring anybody to do that, but, sometimes you just don't know, right? If you cross the wrong person, it happened to Jesus, it can happen to us. So, I was talking to someone yesterday who was doing a one-on-one with me, and I said, we just don't have a choice. Speaking from a Christian perspective, and I think it really, all those faith traditions that I'm beginning to learn more about, you don't have a choice. You don't get to choose, to sit back and allow people to suffer. You don't get to choose to sit back and not build community. You don't get to choose. And if you look at Genesis that Dr. Mason referred to, we were called to be stewards. And it doesn't mean we just boss things around and run the world because we're the richest country in the world, but it means that we care for, that we make sure it's thriving, growing, vibrant, vital. It's beloved. And so we don't really have a choice. And so that's sort of the theological grounding that I come from, that we're each created in God's image, and we have to treat one another as such. And so the tools that we use really, again, go back to, connecting. And I put these down here under number 2, because I think this is a place for us to have conversation. We must want power. And I know people look like, ooh, that's bad. But, even the Bible tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but has given us a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. Power is the ability to do something. Power is the ability to act. And we all should want that. We should all want the ability to do something. And not just complain, not have stuff happen to us, not have stuff happen to our communities, but to be able to do something. It doesn't mean power over. Again, we're talking about connecting. It means power with. We're going to do something together. If you advocate for, or you are fighting against, but you don't believe that you have power to really make change, then you're really just trying to feel better about how you're spending your time and living your life. We have to really believe that we can do something. And that's what power is to us in organizing. Power is the ability to act, and there are 2 sources of power. Organized people, which is how we connect, and organized money, which is how the rich continue to take over the country and, kind of usurp our values as a country. And again, money's not evil either, but how it's used. And so we, since a lot of us aren't, filthy rich, and so we can't necessarily lobby or advocate to get our way, to get the buildings we want, the food we want, the medicines we want, we have to organize, we have to connect together. We have to begin to build movements like Dr. Mason's talking about, so that change can happen. That's how we do this, by connecting to one another around common issues. That's what these institutes do, bring us together around and build. That's how we build power. So that's 2 ways we talk about building power. We must be clear about our self-interest. And often that's confused with selfishness, and it's not. You're either selfish Often people say you're either selfish or you're selfless. We're offering a third opportunity, which is self-interested, meaning that you are operating out of what matters to you. And actually, when we teach this in organizing training, there's a Latin word, interest, that means self among others. So when you live out of a self-interest, a common value, things that matter, like you're here together on a common interest around health and working together and making change, and that's okay. And again, I often refer to the biblical text that says, love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. Not one or the other. Not only love your neighbor, which would be selfless, not only love yourself, which would be selfish, but love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. That's a self-interested relationship. That's really being clear about what matters to you and what drives you, what motivates you. And that's important because if you're not clear, then it's hard to engage in relationship with other people. You'll get pulled by every whim or every situation, and every time somebody calls you, you're running off to some action. And it may be important, but if it's not self-interested and it's not in common and it's not really something that's motivating you, then it comes and goes. And these times require that we're steadfast like a tree, like we started our meditation. We need to be planted, resilient, as Dr. Mason has said. And so it requires that we're really clear about what matters to us. And then we've talked about this already, being serious about building relationships. No movement, not one, is going to happen with just me or just Jane or just Kirsten. I mean, it really is going to require that we build relationships with one another. And it can't be that I'm walking down the street, I see you, I say, hey, how you doing? And I don't even give you a chance to answer kind of relationship. It's a really deepening our knowing of one another. Me knowing your story, you knowing mine, and that's how we begin to really build relationships and are able to build movements. If we want to be able to organize effectively, we have to know one another's story in a way that, our times don't necessarily foster. They foster the hurry up and go, push the microwave button, text, hey, I text. I'm not gonna say I don't. I talk to my dad more about texting than I do calling, but I do call too. But how do we really get to know one another so that when I look at Shirley, I know her story, I know why she does this, I know where we connect, and I'm able to really begin to build those relationships in powerful ways. And we have to be willing to, and I keep using must because we just must. I'm not trying to be bossy. It's just, these are extraordinary times and we have to be just a little bit militant. And you guys can relanguage that into something nicer. But we must be willing to engage in agitation, not irritation, agitation. And agitation means it's an act of love. If I say something matters to me, and Jane knows that I say, eating healthy matters to me, and every time we bump into each other, I'm at McDonald's, if she cares about me, then she'll say, Marilyn, the last time I saw you, you were really struggling with health issues and you said you weren't going to eat McDonald's. She's agitating me to remember what I said matters to me. Not just everybody wants to mind their own business these days. And we don't speak up. And we don't hold folk accountable. We don't hold ourselves accountable. We don't hold each other accountable. And if I love you, then I need to hold you accountable to what you say matters to you. Not because I'm judging. It's not judgment. It's not about what you didn't do for me. You said you wanted to build a business. Why aren't you out there hustling? That kind of thing. And it's an act of love. Jesus did it all the time to the religious leaders. You say you know so much. You say you're called, you didn't say it in these words, but you say you were called by God, but then you're letting people go hungry. You say you know the laws about the Sabbath, but you're worried about what happens on this day rather than feeding hungry people or saving people who are sick or blind. Is that really what God intends for God's people? So there's an agitation there. So I think Jesus was an agitator. And then the last thing is that I'm going to mention is you must have the courage to act. So all these things fall into place, and then we have to do something. We have to engage in direct action. We have to sometimes get ourselves arrested. We have to speak out and write to Congress and in Springfield and every place else. And we have to act. We have to be willing to say something, to do something, and to put our faith into motion. So it doesn't, because we can build power and do all this stuff, but we can't do this and then keep ourselves sort of behind a bubble. We have to be willing to act on behalf of our communities that we love so much. And you know, it's going to take all of us to put our feet to the fire to get the work done. So that's my 2 cents.